Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live virtual session. I am Dhruv from the People Matters team, and I'll be your host for today. I formally welcome you all today to today's webcast on reimagining onboarding and creating an impactful experience through gamification. This is brought to you by People Matters and is in association with Imarticus Learning. Today's fast changing business environment demands that companies stay on top of the changing skill demands and skill requirements. With evolving technologies and a greater emphasis on digitalization, skills the skills landscape has been reshaped and impacted significantly. Impactful learning programs are need of the hour, and this is where onboarding plays an important role. Gamification of the first 90-day journey of an employee provides companies with the right opportunity to merge engagement with learning effortlessly. In addition to driving the right results, gamification introduces competition, connection, and collaboration models to ensure high participation in the hybrid workplace. With this context, I welcome you to today's webcast on reimagining onboarding and creating an impactful experience through gamifications. Before we begin with our discussion today, however, let me give you a brief idea on our partner, Imarticus Learning. Imarticus Learning has had an impeccable record of providing path-breaking enterprise solutions to various tech-oriented learning needs, which are induction training, e-learning, gamification, game-based onboarding, and much more. Imarticus specializes in finance, technology, and leadership training and has delivered impactful learning modules to top companies in India and abroad. Now, without further ado, let me welcome our great panel of experts. Firstly, we have with us today Pramay Jain, founder and CEO of Tartan. Tartan has been built with a huge mission with social purpose to help millions of people that are in the workforce in India and globally to become financially healthier and have a happier work life. Before his work at Tartan, Pramay was a risk management and analytics professional at marquee companies like HSBC Bank, HDFC Bank, and Citibank. Before building Tartan, he was heading the risk and HR analytics of IDFC Bank, First Bank. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Pramay.
Thank you, Drew.
Great,
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Yeah, great having you with us, Pramay. Next, we have Manvi Pathak, Head Learning and Organizational Development at Samsung R&D Institute, India. Dr. Manvi Pathak has an expertise in driving people strategy by focusing on leadership development, talent, and succession. She comes with a vast experience of working in top companies like PwC, Tata Motors, and Cipla, and maintains a strong academic interest and is a visiting faculty to various B schools. It's great to have you with us, Manvi. Manvi, I think you're on mute if you could. Okay, great. I think,
Hi. Hi.
hi,
Hi.
great.
So thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
Sure, Manvi. It's great. It's great to have you with us. Mo- Moving ahead, we have Sandeep Ram, Senior Vice President, Head Enterprise Learning at Imarticus Learning, an entrepreneur, product, and process design professional with over 18 years of work experience. Sandeep is an avid researcher in the area of applied learning games and has publications in leading academic journals. Sandeep designs and develops complex simulation games that mimic the real world setup and allows participants to experiment in a risk free environment. The games he has designed has been used by leading corporations and academic institutions across the world. It's great to have you with us, Sandeep.
Thank you, Dhruv. Thanks for having me here as well.
With this, I think we have our panel in set, and without any further ado, let me kickstart our discussion for today. So, my first question is directed to all our panelists who've joined us today, and we can start with Pramay, and we can go on to Manvi, and then Sandeep can definitely give your inputs to this. But I would like to kick off this discussion on reimagining onboarding is by taking a step back and looking at what top employee or technological trend are you seeing currently in the market that is reshaping onboarding, how onboarding programs are designed and executed in the hybrid world of work? So we can start with you, Pramay.
Sure. Welcome to other panelists also, and thanks for having me through. I would kick off with something that not just onboarding, but what's happening in general in the world of work, right? So how the workforce is shaping up, how the culture and work culture is being changing, right? So especially post COVID world in last 2 3 years, what we have seen is there's a lot of remote and hybrid work that is happening, right? So that's one key thing, and it's going to stay like that. It's very hard in general across the board. We have seen that a lot of companies adopted, unadopted, and coming back to remote work, and trying to provide as much flexibility to the workforce that they can, right? That's one very important aspect to note. And that also, we will try to correlate with some of the onboarding experience. The second big thing that we are seeing is change in behavior in terms of the demographics, right? So in terms of how people have reacted to this hybrid, work culture, and especially the Gen Z and the millennials, I think they have really, uh, you know, now they are setting out expectations for ourselves and the organizations to actually adopt to as per their needs, right? And there are cultures to be built, to cater to them, to make sure that they work with us, they stick to them, and also the way they work, right? There's a lot of co-working spaces that have come up, and there are hybrid work cultures. Basically, you can work anywhere, in small groups, online, offline. So those kind of things have also been very different. And what important, related thing is the data security, the privacy, data privacy, and a lot of other things have also become extremely important in building that trust from employee side and employer side has become very very important, right? And there's a lot of use of software tools that are being required for onboarding, data management, etc., and also the regular work that they do. The single sign-on, ID management, security access. These are, I think, they all have transformed to a different level. And if I have to correlate with the onboarding, not just onboarding, but the entire work cycle of an employee, right from identification of the candidate till the time he spends time with the organization. Key
Sure.
things that that have come up with is they need a they need a very very smooth onboarding process, smooth, engaging, because people really want to know and get to know things very very fast and at their fingertips, right? And there have been certain studies. I think I was going through some of the studies that 60 to 70% of the employees now make an impression about the organization within those initial 20 to 30 days, and they decide that how much they want to stick to the organization. And that's a very very important aspect, and this is where you need to really really engage them better, and hence the onboarding experience is becomes very very important. And it's not just about getting to know about the policies, and few other stuff, but in general about the organization, the people culture, and pretty much how they want to work and they want to operate. Pretty much everything.
Definitely.
And at the end of the day, final bottom line is that now the better work life, simple work life, is a key thing that employees demand, right? And it has to go in that onboarding process. They are well communicated why working with an organization is so important, why your work is so important, and how can you engage them better, right? So I think probably these are the things that are really of very prime importance in today's world.
Thank you. Thank you for setting that context, Pramay. And I'm sure as the conversation goes on, we delve further into how do you actually look at creating that smooth and engaging onboarding process. Over to you, Manvi. What do you think is the one top trend which is perhaps driving how onboarding programs are designed and executed in today's hybrid world of work?
Yeah, thank you, Dhruv, and very glad to be a part of this panel. And I think Pramay has set the context very well, and he's already touched on a lot of important points. From hybrid work to the the digital native workforce that we have. So traditional, in the present context, I'd like to just add on that traditional onboarding style, the way that we used to do onboarding, one way communication and passive learning, was neither effective that time, and now in present context I think it's going to be have a negative impact. So companies have long realized that there is need to reinvent their onboarding practices, and gamification is actually a very interesting process which involves adding game like elements to non game activities. Okay, so very simply put, if you ask me, this would be the definition: to increase engagement and motivation. And gamification is something which has been adopted not only in onboarding. A lot of we have so many apps that we download, and one of the studies that has been done stated that as many as 83% of those who download a mobile app will uninstall it within 24 hours if it is not engaging. Okay,
Sure.
so gamification makes new hires more engaged and reinforce their positive mindset when they are joining the company. Okay, and gamifying onboarding is a secret recipe which has been used by a lot of companies to and there are different elements of it, like badges, points, coupons, that we use to make the entire experience very, very fun and competitive. And
Sure.
especially when we are onboarding digitally native workforce, these younger generation people they have different motivational and behavioral patterns, which requires a set of techniques that better align with their style of learning and skill development with the business goals. So I feel that gamified onboarding is a natural, fun, and effective alternatives for the changing workforce of today. And there's so many benefits of onboarding through gamification. It gives a break from the virtual fatigue that people are used to getting, and the stickiness is very, very high. People tend to remember, the recall is much more, and there are plenty of benefits of onboarding, and there has been a lot of research that people gamification which inserts fun elements to stimulate learning and behavior leads to a much better outcome, and in fact engagement levels of people and the stickiness to the organization also increases as a
Definitely.
result of gamification.
Definitely,
So that's
Manvi.
all
And
I
yeah,
wanted
and
to
I'm
bring.
sure, I think you've covered a lot of points. And I think as the discussion goes on, I'm sure even Sandeep will love to deliberate further on a lot of these points. But just to sort of wrap up this first question, Sandeep, what do you think is an important employee trend that you're seeing that companies need to respond to when it comes to designing the onboarding program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dhruv. In fact, you actually see, I mean, at both the ends, right? Both from the organization end and from the employee end, there seems to be a paradigm shift in the expectation in the first place, right? So it's quite fascinating to know that organizations have started recognizing the importance and need for an effective onboarding. What was, if you ask somebody 10, 15 years back, onboarding was just a tick in the box in terms of just one of the activities in the overall life cycle of a new employee joining an organization. While right now, the fact that a lot of us have gathered here and talking about onboarding, it's just an example of the fact that organizations are putting a lot more importance to the very simple act of onboarding, right? So
Sure.
now the overall trend has been organizations want to provide an experience. It's just not a form of information processing, which is knowledge being shared and a new employee being assimilating those information. Is just not cutting the trend. It's all about providing the experience. And more importantly, if you actually see the world that we are in, the psychological contract between an employee and an employer is also in great strain, right? So which means to say
Definitely.
that somebody needs to have a sense of belongingness to the organization that they join, right? And hence, like what Manvi was saying, game based onboarding and gamification does have some of the answers to questions that people have been searching as to how do you really bring in that stickiness, how do you really bring in the overall expectation. And specifically, like what Manvi said, the digital natives who are born gamers also want an experience, which because the moment I get into an organization, and if, for example, in the pandemic world, few of us wouldn't have even visited. We could have been a virtual employee, received an offer, not had an opportunity to visit a physical setup or even meet our leaders or peers, right? So the expectation of a new employee as compared to expectation of somebody who has already been in the system is that I'm anxious to join a new organization. Can the new organization give me the kind of experience that I'm really looking at? So, and research in the field has also clearly found a correlation between an effective onboarding to employee retention as well. So if you ask me,
Definitely.
one trend that is going to be in the minds of HR leaders is, how do you really bring in engagement? Because the Netflix platforms gives you that kind of an engagement. So an employee outside the office setup today has more engaging experiences when he or she enters a retail world, when he or she consumes a lot of web content, right? So if that's already set up as a consumer, now I would want the same kind of experience when I'm actually entering the workforce as well. So it's a challenging time, but also an interesting time to meet those expectations. But I think we are headed in the right direction by looking at the right kind of solutions which are available there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for actually encapsulating this period as being a challenging yet an interesting time. So for further innovations to come into this field. So thank you. Thank you for that, Sandeep. Moving ahead, Pramay, you did mention a couple of points around the engagement and making the experience really smooth during an onboarding phase for a new employee. What, from your vantage point, do you see? What are the other key expectations that an employee who's entering an organization? What is the expectation that companies really need to now match? I mean, expectation that they might have been ignoring in the pre-pandemic world, but is a non-negotiable in the world today.
From employees perspective, okay, so see, what in fact, by hiring ourselves, and what we are seeing
Yep,
in our domain is that they really want very targeted communication, right? And it has to be
definitely.
fun, it has to be engaging, the it has to be very, I would say, highly immersive experience that they are looking for nowadays. What do I mean by that is, they really don't want something that is not, you can, gone are the days where you can send out 10 emails and you expect people will read
Correct.
all of them, right? Gone are the days when you send out notifications or policy documents and they will read all of it and they will understand this, right? So somehow you have to be able to engage, in the sense that whenever they are going through something, they are learning about either your company goals or policies or whatever that you want to communicate, right? Be it learning and development itself. So that's
Definitely.
one thing. It's very, very important from employee expectations. That's one thing. The second thing is, one other thing that we have seen is the community aspect also, right? If rather than being a solo person on screen, you are just going through or playing something, or doing going through uh, you know something that you are communicating. If you can bring in or make groups, be it online, be it offline, and you can then communicate some of the things, again, that is a very good thing that we are seeing. It brings engagement within the team. It can also, in I would say, in the time of lack of touch, you can actually at least create a lack of you can actually add experience and feel uh,
Definitely.
the bonding within the team members as well, right? The fun
Definitely.
element, especially if we have to actually categorize the segments also. If you look at Gen Zs, right? People who are first
Yeah.
time taking offers, what Sandeep mentioned, right? People who are just taking offers for the first time, joining the company in the initial days of the maybe start of the career or very early days of the career. So that's a completely different segment. The expectation is fun, rewarding, etc. Right? So those are the key things, I would say, need to be taken care. But having said that, you really need to identify what segment of employees or workforce that we are targeting. That's very, very
Definitely.
important. It's a
Yeah.
tech company versus a manufacturing company. The needs are very, very different. The requirements are very,
Definitely.
very different. And also, if you can do a mix and match rather than make a very long monotonous content or games, right? So also today is one thing that is there, even the learning experience has to be bite sized or very short crisp content. So even if you have to communicate even something very good like rewards and benefits for them, again it has to be very very done a very good mix and match with some of the things that as an organization you want to drive. So probably these are
Definitely.
the things, right, from employee perspective, they're extremely critical.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Pramay, for not looking at employee as this one monolith, but actually understanding that there is a very segmented, multi-generational approach that company need to understand and then apply. So thank you for sort of highlighting that to us. Manvi, coming to you, I think Pramay helped encapsulate a lot of these trends that from an employee perspective is necessary today. From a design and delivery point of view of onboarding programs, uh, Manvi, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm
You're
there.
on. Okay,
Yeah.
great, great. Thank you. So I just wanted to know from you, from a design and delivery standpoint, how do you look at learning experience being created in the onboarding program?
Yeah, so I kind of agree with a lot of things which has already been mentioned by Pramay, and I would like to just reiterate that the diversity of today's workforce and the significant pivot towards hybrid working environment that we have means that the traditional onboarding process that we have been doing are no longer relevant. So things that he already mentioned about gamified onboarding, it's going to be appealing because the kind of people that we are catering to, employees that we have, because not only of the ease of application in hybrid, which is be it online, virtual, or kind of a in person partially, companies are embracing this onboarding gamification. They have experienced higher level of knowledge transfers, better retention rates already mentioned, and improved productivity, and along with this high very high levels of engagement, as a result of which what happens is that the new inductees, they are very well integrated into the new system as compared to our old ways of doing things. So
Definitely.
so some of the things which you have already mentioned is that the onboarding gamification that can be done through various ways. One of the ways in which this can be done is the bite-sized information. Onboarding new employees with bite-sized information helps them in assimilating information about the organization, because if you see, typically we present so much about the organization in one day, whether it's values or company business, and when you do it in a bite-sized information, if it's delivered in a bite-sized manner, it prevents from cognitive overload, which actually helps in better assimilation of the content. Not only that, there are different ways in which we are doing, using a very, if you have a very good learning management system, you can make the content very interactive. Okay, and so that the person is actually actively engaging with the content that is presented. So fun challenges people have, and then not only that, flexibility. In fact, a lot of organizations, in my previous one of my previous companies, what they had done is that, because there was so much they wanted to share with the new employees about the history and culture, that there were videos that were shared and people would do it at their own pace. So everybody, this kind of asynchronous learning sometimes is very very good and ideal. So some organizations do this beautifully, and as organizations are able to onboard at their own pace and complete their onboarding in their own time, this also makes them somewhere own this entire journey. So there are different ways of doing it, and I think the results have been very very promising and good.
Thank you for that, Manvi, and thank you
Dhruv,
for yeah, yeah,
Drew, I would just like to add, to what
yeah,
Manvi
sure,
just said, right?
sure, yeah.
From a design and delivery perspective, what I also see is, there is a spectrum, of design and delivery tools that's, today available, right? So from what we call as low cost games, which is nothing but activities that we typically do in our training rooms, where, we let people come together, understand, get to know them, bond, and also help them understand the ways of working, the culture of the organization. That's one end of the spectrum, right? And the other end of the spectrum, you do have digital interventions, and we have apps today which provide onboarding related content, which is if I'm joining a bank and if I'll have to do, let's say, my AML KYC training programs, and if there are a series of programs that I would need to do even before I join the organization, now there is a learning path already created even before I get onboarded, right? So there are organizations today. The interesting fact that also I see is the engagement and onboarding starts even before day one, day two induction, right? So it's more in the pre-boarding stage. The moment I get my offer, organizations are thinking, okay, can I actually go ahead and then start engaging my prospective employee as early as they've received the offer? So that's where a
Definitely.
lot of digital interventions in terms of either onboarding apps or game-based onboarding could actually come into play, right? So there
Yeah.
are multiple interventions from low delivery mechanisms, from low cost delivery tools of simply connecting each other, having low cost games, as to the other end of the spectrum where you could have digital interventions. So there is a gamut of delivery options and consumption that's possible today.
Great, great. Thank you both Manvi and Sandeep to sort of look at how the delivery aspect of a gamified onboarding also happens. And thank you, Sandeep, for actually explaining us about the spectrum. Because my next question is to you, and we've actually been hearing this term in this discussion a lot around gamified learning and gamification. But now I would hand it over to you and ask you, how do you see game-based employee onboarding actually enable companies to deal some of the pressing talent changes, especially when it comes to skilling and creating the right experience and creating engagement right from the get-go? How do you see a game-based employee onboarding be an effective tool in doing that?
Sure. Great question, Dhruv. I mean, the interesting anecdotal, thing that I have is, today onboarding is also not quite limited only to employee onboarding, right? So organizations have also started looking at, hey, can I do functional onboarding? Can I do process onboarding? Can I do sales onboarding? It's just not your day one, induction, which largely talks about, the company's values, culture, and history, right? It is going beyond the facet of the general notion of all about the company, but it is also getting to know the employee much better as well. So it's more of a two-way street is how I see it, right? It's just not only the employee knowing more about the company, it is also the employer knowing more about the employee who is joining as well. So what I would have is I just have a quick presentation to just walk you through about the key aspects of it. So so the biggest challenge, as I was saying, which is staring at us, is the psychological contract that we were speaking about, right? But the more importantly, other facets is when we're really looking at the onboarding challenge. One is our pre-boarding churn and infant mortality. So pre-boarding churn pertains to people who accept offers and don't join the organization, and infant mortality pertains to people who have accepted offers and who start updating their CVs and up to the market within the first 1 year of they joining an organization. So the biggest challenge that most organizations today have is, how do I really onboard an employee effectively? Because a lot of studies, as I said, correlate to effective onboarding to employee retention as well. Because an effective onboarding could actually bring in a sense of belongingness, of an employee to an organization. The second important aspect is, the functional managers want the employee to be productive as early as possible, right? So the moment a candidate joins, it's like, hey, now you're on the floor, let's start working. But that isn't true, right? So it does take time for an employee to become productive. In the traditional way, you actually have the shadowing process, right? An employee needs to shadow existing work, follow the file, and then understand their work. But given the fact that we're living in an era where time has shrunk and space has expanded, you really want people to actually become productive as early as possible. So, and there is only so much that an instructor-led training program could do, of training people constantly, right? So I love this anecdote where I could watch Sachin Tendulkar play the cover drive for almost 30 hours, right? And now that you actually ask me to go to the field and face Shoaib Akhtar, I really can't do it, right? I could just I just can't do it. But I have watched Sachin Tendulkar play the cover drive. But that really is not equivalent to me actually, learning on the field and playing on the nets, isn't it? So productivity is also about experientially, simulating and understanding the role that I'm going to play within the organization. So if I'm joining, a bank and processing a loan, do I actually know how I could process a loan, experientially in a risk-free environment? That's where games actually come in, right? Games actually provide a risk-free environment for people to practice without the fear of failure. And that's where the onboarding, the employee also feels confident at the end of the day that, what, I'm in a comfortable space, right? So when I hit the flow, I'm actually in a comfortable space because I know my work, I know the exceptions, I know the threats, right? And the third and most important, challenge that we also face is passive learning, right? This is something that Manvi and Pramay touched before as well, which is the notion that knowledge is acquired, by giving you a lot of information. That isn't the case. As humans, we really love discovery. We love the act of play. We would want to explore. So we would need to move away from the passive learning approach to an active learning approach. So this is where the entire onboarding journey could be gamified, right? From the pre-boarding stage, as early as one accepts the offer, and your day one and day two induction, which really talks about your histories, your values, your culture, and your integration phase, where you start understanding more about your processes, where you start understanding your functional work. So in this entire journey, you could actually have a simulated environment and have multiple learning paths for each individual who are joining different functions. So if you could visualize a game where there are multiple game rooms, which virtually transports you to an office environment, or to a banking environment, or to a retail environment, depending upon the industry that you work with, games could virtually transport you to that particular environment and make you, give you that kind of a day in the work life simulation. So if I'm joining, Tartan, if I'm joining Pramay's company, Pramay could actually virtually set up, a game, for me, where I get to understand, what I would need to do, by just playing the game, right? And then I could go to Pramay and then corroborate, my experiences as well. So experiences here stay longer, right? And the retention rates are much higher, like what Manvi also said. So this is extremely important, where we are able to simulate the day in the work life of a candidate, and it is just not about understanding the values. So it's about how do I translate the values into action. If the value is about integrity and I'm working for a bank, can I actually let you know what integrity means for us in the bank? What would be the ways of working when we talk about integrity at the bank? So these are certain things that could beautifully come as form of scenarios that we could do in games. And the technology has improved so much that today we have authoring engines where you would be able to author the content as well. So different organizations could craft their own unique journeys, and it need not be a one size fit all kind of an approach. So now you have a unique onboarding game where the content that you consume is completely customized, and the look and feel of the environment is completely customized. So imagine somebody joining your office in a tier 2, tier 3 kind of a setup, and he has never visited your head office. Now you could actually provide an experience to that candidate who is remotely joining in a tier 3 city, to virtually walk into the office, meet your leaders, talk to them, understand the work, and that's where you have the kind of connect that you would need. And he or she also gets to understand the day in the work of of that particular role that they are joining. So that reduces the level of anxiety that people have when they hit the flow, right? So in a nutshell, we are talking about a standardization where you do have digital interventions provides a standardization. It's a scalable kind of an approach where you could actually use it for different onboarding requirements. And the productivity improvement and time save is what Manvi previously touched as well, right? The kind of productivity saves that we would have. So onboarding games actually provide you a virtual experience to understand your work much better than just a physical setup where you're just being told what the company values are. So that's in a nutshell how employee onboarding could be more powerful, more experiential, more immersive, and more impactful through game-based learning systems.
Thank you, Sandeep, and thank you for actually giving our audience also a fairly in-depth into this mystical concept of what actually is gamified onboarding, because you can then break it down and look at how it's actually applicable to your own processes and how you can actually, because it's a tool that can help you across multiple stages of an onboarding program, I feel.
True.
And so thank you for that, Sandeep. Just moving ahead, Pramay and Manvi, my next question is targeted to both of you actually. And we've seen Sandeep sort of break down gamified onboarding into its various facets and what it can do as a tool. How do you think have you, if you've used it in your own experience, have you seen it actually translate into improving metrics, employee metrics like employee experience, employee engagement, and employee retention? Are there any critical strategies that you would want to highlight so that this tool can be used effectively? Pramay, we can start with you and then we can go on to Manvi.
I think thanks Sandeep for the presentation. Quite I think certain things we have seen, but going looking at it in that form is extremely useful. So Dhruv, probably this is something. Probably I'm adding some caution here, right? At the end of the day, gamification is a tool, right? And it's a tool, and it has to be used very very properly as well, because it can actually give you a reverse experience as well. So probably what we have learned is that you need to back the tool with the right I would say play field, right? You also need a good play field, a good pitch to be able to play that cover drive. So even if you have done the practice or have the experience, so uh, maybe adding incentivization, right? It may not be a monetary, but something very very meaningful that you can actually connect to the right individual, right? Maybe for a youngster it could be something, for a non-youngster or maybe a middle-aged person could be something, right? The second thing is the content, and the flow becomes, and the timing itself becomes very very important, right? You cannot do an onboarding training on day 5, something that you need to do on day 1, right? You cannot delay it. You have to be really really make sure that happens very very correctly, right? And the third thing that what we have felt is that apart from the incentivization and the content, is basically, if you can put a good touch feel, right? Hey, have you tried it out, right? Some basic communication that can go either from maybe the people, maybe just like I used to have a friends or a mentor concept, but something as a
Definitely.
community concept as well. I think that's another thing that we have seen becomes very very important, because word of mouth experiences from your colleagues and people become very very important in terms of how that tool is being perceived by those team members. So I think these are the things that uh, I believe, three things very very important in terms of how we want to gamify the entire system and make sure to see it as success, because it's a tool, and it's also I would say a double-edged sword, because if you play it wrong, it can hurt you badly as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Pramay, for bringing in that necessary context of how do you actually use gamification and how do you actually gamify onboarding. Manvi, over to you. Any points that you think are relevant today when it comes to using gamified onboarding, especially to meet your learning needs and skilling needs?
So I think we've had enough discussion on the benefits, increase in retention, increase in productivity, and as I would like to agree. I agree with Pramay when he said that it's a double-edged sword, and especially some of the programs which we have started, because there are a lot of compliance trainings where we use gamification. Okay, so I've worked in pharma industry, where, and especially when you have these diversity posh cases, it's very important that people might be using a gamifying tool, but the messaging should be clear. And probably in those kind of cases, some bit of debriefing also helps. After you have done a kind of a gamified training on a posh, or any kind of sensitization training, some kind of a debrief, just to understand whether the person has actually understood what is being conveyed through that program. So that actually becomes very, very important. But agree that some of the things which have really benefited is increase in retention. I feel that there's a lot of ownership because people have a lot of control over learning, so there's a lot of ownership. Then there are a lot of like when you have a long program, if people have to do as a part of compliance or mandatory training, this progress which is made by the learner, which is shown in terms of progress bars and all, those things are very visible to the learner and educator. So the person likes that kind of a feeling, and that is seen. Then things about making the learning, because you try it out in a safe environment, you make mistakes and learn, as we have was already discussed by Sandeep. So here gamification provides a very, very relaxed approach which makes learning all the more fun. And likewise, I think quantifying employee learning, rewarding learning, job satisfaction, all these are a lot of matrices that we can get through gamifying, and we can actually develop a case for having gamified onboarding for our organizations. Because a successful gamified onboarding can be linked to good feedback, progress tracking,
Definitely.
achievement of learning goals, rewards. All that can be done through a good gamified process.
Definitely, Mandy. And
Yeah,
I
Dhruv,
agree with you on. Yeah, yeah. Please, Pranay, please, definitely.
something. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
one thing is, also probably I missed out and it clicked to me, and probably I should add is now this itself is becoming a very specialized thing within HR, right? And hence a culture consultative or an expert approach here is extremely important. Like we have Sandeep who's PhD in this, right? So somebody like them is extremely become very, very important and to learn from, because as an HR or as an individual in an organization, we are like in too many things, right? And we might miss out those small elements, which I think
Mhm.
having a consultative or an expert approach can definitely help a lot. So I think that's also becomes very, very important for any large organizations, and as well as smaller organizations who really want to build a very strong, powerful team, especially in a hybrid world.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that point also from me, because that actually brings me to the last question of this discussion, and that is over to you, Sandeep. Where, I mean, you are at the nerve center of the developments, both technological and the thought process behind using gamified learning and gamified onboarding. What do you think as, or what would you suggest are some of the mindset shifts that even people on the other side of the tranche, the HR professionals and the HR leaders, what do you think are aspects that they should consider when they go for an gamified onboarding program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dhruv. This is something that I've been asked, many times, and I think this is a brilliant one, right? So there are, two important factors that I would like to, I would like every one of us here in this particular forum to really reflect. One, like any hype cycle that we have seen, in the market, right? Because every time, uh, periodically we have these hype cycles, like that of the Gartners, where they say that, hey, this is the next big thing that's going to be there. At one point in time it is gamification, one point in time it is metaverse. So there is a lot of hype cycle, hype around every single thing that we see, and that's the world that we are in. And the same is true with gamification as well, right? There are extremely bad examples of how gamifications have been implemented, and hence things have not really worked well, and then people paint a bad picture about gamification. Right, and there are organizations which have done it really, really well. For example, think organizations like Nike, who have really mastered the act of using gamification, and there are multiple case studies which have spoken about how they have done it quite effectively. Because gamification at the end of the day is just not about the points, badges, and leaderboards, right? So the biggest conundrum that we have is the moment we put in points, we put in badges, we put in leaderboards, we start saying that what, that is gamification. But there is a lot more to it. Gamification is much higher, where you could actually look at evidence based learning, right? Evidence-based learning, stealth assessment, non-obtrusive assessments are integral part of game-based onboarding and assessments, right? So just to give you a perspective, and for all the leaders out there, the way in which games, what we call as an applied learning game or an epistemic game, the way in which the games are designed, as a designer, is through what we call as an evidence-centered design approach, right? Which means to say that the skills and proficiency that one likes to measure is broken down into tasks, and these tasks are embedded in the game. So, for example, if I'm actually being onboarded to a sales role, and as a salesperson, I would need to have certain skills, certain knowledge. I need to have certain identity, value, and ethics, of that particular function, right? So these five is called an epistemic frame. So and this is so true. I mean, historically, right? A doctor thinks, acts, behaves like a doctor. An engineer, thinks, acts, behave like an engineer, and so does a lawyer, right? So any community of practice has a certain behavior, has a certain predisposition. So if I'm being onboarded to an organization, I'm being onboarded to that particular community. If I'm joining an IT firm, I'm joining a community of engineers who have certain like-minded interests and thought process, right? And they have certain skills and proficiencies which could be measured, right? So an effective onboarding could also be that you have these skills and proficiencies laid down into tasks, and these tasks are attempted by individuals, and you start actually knowing your employees much better, right? So today, when you
Definitely.
look at onboarding, I had a 14-day induction when I joined my first job, and as time progressed, it has become half a day, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then finally, there is no onboarding. You're right here, start work, right? So nobody has the time these days. It's a Maggie world, if I could say, right? So if that's the case, how do you really have a sense of belongingness, right? So gamification is much more than points, badges, and leaderboards. If you have known of various use cases and case studies, which have spoken good about it or bad about it, there is merits in that. But at the same time, a good implementation, from an HR, involves a lot of co-creation. It involves
Definitely.
designers like us and HR fraternity to sit together to understand what is the business problem, break the problem into certain measurable tasks. These tasks are embedded in the game, and then we start actually making inferences out of it, right? So that's more of a long term a relationship between the designers and people who consume the art that we create. So co-create, uh, and don't really stop only with what you see in terms of the iceberg of points, badges, and leaderboards. There is much more to the world of gamification, and that's something that I would want the people out there who's listening to this particular forum to have in mind.
Thank you, Sandeep, for encapsulating the entire discussion and actually highlighting the importance of co-creating and delving further than just badges, icons, and points and things like that, and actually looking at the other three-fourths of the iceberg when it comes to leveraging gamification. So thank you for that, Sandeep, and thank you, Pramay and Manvi. With that, we close this discussion. We have some audience questions that, I mean, we always get a lot of audience questions during highly engaging discussions such as these. But due to the paucity of time, I'll only be taking two or three top questions. So my first audience question is directed at both Pramay and Sandeep. We've looked at employee as an individual, and we've looked at a lot of these gamified solutions for an employee. One of our top audience questions is when we look at boosting energy and creating a sense of belonging through communities, how can gamified learning help companies achieve that, especially with new hires? So maybe Pramay, you can share your thoughts on this first, and then we can hear Sandeep's thought.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The question is around how do we boost, teams' energy, people's energy, right? So
Exactly, and create that sense of belonging through a gamified learning solution during
right.
the
So
onboarding.
uh, to be very honest, I think the gamified learning is just acts as a spice in that case. The first thing that comes is about the work, about the people they work. I think that is
Yep.
very, very important, that the culture and the environment is pretty healthy, strong, communicative, well connected. That's a pretty much about it, right? So that's where an expert frameworks, you know, from gamification can come, and then how do we keep the team and people engaged, right? So uh, it could be a simple game that can connect, four people. So typically, in fact, within our organization, we do a chai pe charcha every week, and we play games like online games. It could be very simple games like Scrabble, or it could be something like playing, very very simple games, right? We do that at times. So, but you can also think, go on next level, where you can actually do a team based, approach, and keep figuring out and keep taking sense around what's happening. You can do a mood indicators also. There are certain mood indicator sort of games that you can push forth and figure out, hey, what's happening, right? And at times, a lot of the third thing that comes is the personal, how is the personal life, something that typically, which is completely out of work, right? Which, um, as an organization, it could be a least in control, but even you can show some empathy that, hey, we are there for you, right? If you need some help,
Definitely.
we are there. Yeah, and give them sense that, hey, don't worry about it. There are difficult times. We have, had been like a difficult times for a lot of folks, lots of colleagues that we have seen, but make sure that, hey, they feel connected, they feel they have somebody to help them out whenever it's needed. So I think safety net, then good culture in the organization, and then add these spices of gamification can really help, I think, to some extent.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Pramit. Thank you for adding the softer aspects also that people have to always keep in mind while driving social engagement and creating that energy. Sandeep, anything from your end to this question?
Uh, yeah, again, I would, love to look at two aspects, right? So when we have seen our own kids, we have seen youngsters completely glued, and lose track of time when they're actually immersed either in a book or in a game or in a movie, right?
Yeah,
Irrespective of the medium, what's more important is if somebody will have to really have that kind of what we call the energy, there has to be in a state of flow. Only in a state of flow where time ceases to exist and I'm completely engrossed in the object that I'm engrossed, will I have that kind of a connect, right? And you see a lot of youngsters come together, like what Pramay said, in a multiplayer game. They come together, they sit together, they have a common task or a goal that they would need to compete. The second most important task, which also research really talks about, is an interesting fact, called as challenge, right? So the moment I find a task lower, as a lower challenge than my ability, I lose interest. If there is a
definitely.
task which is above, which I think is so complex that I can't achieve, then I lose interest. So an optimal challenge is something that I would need to have, right? And
Exactly.
specifically games which also has AI ML, in it, where it could actually look at and be adaptive, to understand what are your levels of challenge, and then kind of tweak the entire gameplay, with regards to that, would be a good aspect of bringing in energy, right? So the moment I'm engrossed, my energy levels are much higher. The moment I think that there is adequate challenge, there is, and specifically also extrinsic motivation, right? So the moment I know that there is a reward at the end of the day, though I do have my intrinsic motivation, but if I think that there is an extrinsic motivation, that also really plays a part for me to actually have higher energy levels.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Yeah, please, please, if you have any other last point.
I just wanted to, yeah, saying something. I just wanted to
No,
add
no,
one more
I'm,
thing. Yeah. So just wanted to add one more thing is that, here, if you, when we talk about creating a sense of belonging, a lot of things, of course, through gamification, like, in one of the assignments that I had done in the past was where, we had to teach the company values. And if you see companies' values and all, it's very difficult for people across the organization to remember, because sometimes it comes across that something made by the corporate and it doesn't trickle down in the organization. So we used a gamified version of sharing it through Panchtantra stories. Okay, and we taught the people across the organization values through Panchtantra stories. So that way, the stickiness was much better, and it created a sense of, because it was very simple, it was easy for people to understand and connect to the values.
Great, great. Thank you for that, Manya, and thank you to all our panelists for this entire discussion to actually present very, I mean, their viewpoints from different standpoints, so that our audience can actually get a holistic view on how and why gamified onboarding solutions are really relevant today. Quickly, Manvi, my last audience question to you is around, if you had to choose a gamified learning partner, what would the top two or top three features that you would look in a partner? Uh, what would be your top two to top three features that you look for in a gamified learning partner?
So in a gamified learning partner, I think, it has to be, it should be very engaging. They should have a lot of, variety, simple to use, variety, and engaging. uh, these are some of the things that I think I would be interested in using. And of course, it should suit the cost also.
Definitely, definitely. That's always an imperative with most HR initiatives. So thank you for highlighting that also, Manvi. And with this, I think we come to the end of this highly interactive and insightful discussion. Thank you for your time, Pramay, Manvi, and Sandeep. Um, thank you, Imarticus, for joining, for helping us curate this discussion, and thank you, our audience, for taking the time out and joining us. And we hope this has been a very insightful and engaging discussion for all of you. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, Dhruv. Thank you, Anvi.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Sandeep.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Thanks. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.